The moment Richard's fiancée's mother looked at my worn purse and asked if I'd bought it at a thrift store, I knew this dinner would be exactly what I'd feared. But what I didn't know was that in 48 hours, her husband would be begging me not to fire him. My name is Margaret Hayes, and I've spent 3 decades mastering something most people never understand. True power doesn't announce itself with designer labels, it whispers in boardrooms at dawn. Richard had been dating Vanessa Bradford for 11 months, and tonight I was meeting her family at their Greenwich estate. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a simple black dress, comfortable flats, my late husband's watch, nothing flashy. Just a widow who preferred substance over show. Before I go further, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe. The Bradford estate sat behind iron gates, all manicured hedges and imported stone, designed to make visitors feel small. Vanessa answered the door in an expensive dress, her smile practiced and cold. The foyer was marble and crystal, voices coming from the living room sounding rehearsed. Vanessa's mother, Clarissa, held court on a cream sofa, diamonds glittering at her throat. "And this must be Richard's mother," she said, scanning me. "Such a lovely dress. Is it vintage?" The way she said vintage was pure insult. "It's comfortable," I replied. "I prefer quality that lasts." "Well, comfort is certainly important, though I do think a woman should take pride in her appearance at family gatherings." Gregory walked in, tall with silver hair, barely acknowledging me. "So you're Margaret. Richard says you work in business, something corporate?" "I consult with companies going through transitions, helping them restructure." "Sounds like corporate speak for cleaning up messes," he said dismissively. "I run Bradford Industries. We manufacture precision components, real products, not just moving numbers on spreadsheets." "That sounds impressive," I said calmly. Clarissa jumped in. "So, Margaret, Richard mentioned you live in a modest apartment. Have you been there long?" "About 15 years. It suits my needs. I've never seen the point in spending money on space I don't use." Clarissa exchanged a look with Gregory. "Of course, though I do think families should be financially compatible, blended families work best when everyone comes from similar backgrounds." "I think families work best when they're built on respect," I said quietly. "Money comes and goes, but integrity lasts." Brittany suddenly looked up from her phone. "Oh my God, there's an article about Bradford Industries. It says there's been a management shakeup." Gregory's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" The article said Bradford Industries had been acquired by Meridian Holdings, and new leadership would be announced Monday. What it didn't say was that I was Meridian's CEO and Gregory's fate was in my hands. "This is ridiculous," Gregory said. "There's no acquisition." But his phone buzzed, and when he looked, his face went gray. "Excuse me," he muttered, moving toward his study. From down the hall came Gregory's voice rising, angry and defensive. He stormed back in, face flushed. "It's true. Meridian bought 65% 3 days ago. The board approved it without consulting me." "Who's taking over?" Vanessa asked. "They won't tell me," Gregory said. "The announcement is Monday, but this person has full authority to restructure everything." Brittany stared at me. "Wait, you do corporate restructuring? Do you know anything about Meridian Holdings?" "I've heard of them," I said carefully. "They have a reputation for being thorough. Do you work with them?" "I've done some consulting work for Meridian," I admitted, "but I'm not involved in the Bradford acquisition." Richard was pulling my arm. "Mom, let's go." As we left, Clarissa's voice followed. "Whoever they are, they'll probably run the company into the ground." I paused, turning back. Maybe they'll help it reach its full potential with leadership that understands both sides. Sometimes fresh perspective is exactly what's needed. Gregory snorted. "What would you know about running a manufacturing company? You push papers." I smiled. "You're absolutely right. What would I know?" We left, and my phone buzzed, confirming Monday's arrangements were finalized. Richard didn't speak until we were halfway back. "Mom, that was brutal. I had no idea they'd be like that." "They're scared. People become their worst selves when afraid of losing what defines them. But that doesn't excuse them treating you like you weren't good enough," Richard said. "It was classist garbage." "I appreciate you defending me, but I don't need you fighting my battles. I'm tougher than I look." "That thing Brittany asked about Meridian, you said you'd done consulting work, is that true?" My chest tightened. "It's true. I've worked with them on several acquisitions. Have you ever met the CEO?" I chose my words carefully. "I've met the leadership team. They're very focused on results." "Do you think Gregory's in trouble?" "Almost certainly. Companies don't get acquired unless something's gone very wrong." We pulled up outside my building. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need honesty. Are you wealthy? Like really wealthy enough that you've been hiding it my entire life? Where is this coming from? The way you talked about business tonight, the way you stayed calm." "Mom, I'm not stupid. I've been thinking about this for months. You know, things that seem way beyond normal. If I said yes, would that change how you see me?" "I don't know. Honestly, right now I'm wondering if everything I thought I knew was a lie. Did Dad know? Or did you hide it from him too? Your father and I built everything together. And when he died, I promised to protect what we created. That includes protecting you from defining your worth by your bank account. But you let me struggle. I worked 3 jobs in college, took out loans, saved for years, and you could have helped. Would you want Vanessa's life, where everything was handed to you, where people assume your success came from family money? That's not fair. There's middle ground." He was right. I was terrified that if you knew how much money I had, you'd become someone else, someone who relied on wealth instead of work. But I'm 31, getting married. I have a right to know who my mother actually is. "You're right. Come tomorrow and I'll tell you everything. No more secrets." "Tomorrow," he agreed. "But Mom, whatever you tell me will change things between us." "I know," I whispered. Upstairs, I poured wine, thinking about the girl I'd been 40 years ago, working nights while taking business classes, building something from nothing, and I wondered if she'd recognize the woman I'd become. Someone so afraid of losing what she'd built that she'd hidden it from everyone. My phone buzzed, confirming Monday was set, and I thought about Gregory walking into a boardroom, discovering the woman he'd condescended to now controlled his future. Richard arrived at 10 the next morning, holding 2 coffees, shadows under his eyes. He settled into his father's armchair, looking around for clues he'd missed. "So, the truth, all of it. My name is Margaret Hayes. I was born in Detroit to a single mother who worked 2 jobs, put myself through college working full-time, married your father at 25, and we built a life on hard work." Richard nodded. These were things he knew. "When your father died 8 years ago, he left me with life insurance and savings, about $300,000. That's what I told you, and it was true as far as it went." "As far as it went?" "By the time your father passed, we'd turned his software patents into a successful consulting business, and I'd been making strategic investments for over a decade. The $300,000 was just one account." "How many others?" "Today, my net worth is approximately $470 million. The silence was absolute. 400, he couldn't finish. "And that's just personal assets. Through various companies, I control 17 different businesses, including Meridian Holdings." "You don't just consult, you are Meridian." "I founded it 15 years ago. We specialize in acquiring struggling but sound companies, bringing in proper management, turning them around. We've saved over 40 companies and 12,000 jobs." "And Bradford Industries?" "I'm the new CEO, the press conference. Monday is my official introduction. Gregory will be stepping down, and I'll be taking complete control." Richard paced to the window, his back to me. "How long have you known you were going to destroy Vanessa's family?" I flinched. "I've been working on the acquisition for 4 months. But I had no idea you were dating Gregory's daughter until 3 months ago. By then we were too deep into due diligence. And Richard, I'm not destroying anything. I'm saving a company Gregory was driving into bankruptcy. You could have told me. His voice raw. The second you realized who Vanessa's father was, you could have warned me. And what would you have done? Would you have broken up with her to avoid this? Maybe, yes, because how am I supposed to marry into a family whose patriarch you're about to humiliate? But that's why I didn't tell you. I couldn't let you sacrifice your happiness for my business decisions. But we are paying for it, Vanessa called this morning in tears. Her mother is having panic attacks. Her father locked himself in his study with scotch. When they find out Monday that you're behind this, they'll blame me too. I'm sorry. I thought I could keep these worlds separate, but I was wrong. You know what the worst part is? I spent my life believing I knew who you were, and now I'm finding out the woman who taught me humility is actually a corporate titan who plays chess with people's livelihoods. Every acquisition I've done has been about saving companies and protecting jobs. Then why does it feel like you're using Monday to humiliate people who were rude at dinner? Is this about business or revenge? This deal was in motion before that dinner. The board voted to sell. Before you introduced me to Vanessa, I didn't orchestrate this for punishment. I'm doing it because Bradford Industries employs 800 people whose jobs depend on someone making right decisions. What happens Monday? I'll arrive at 9, board meeting at 9:30 where I'm formally introduced. Gregory will be offered a consulting position with no real authority. Then at 11, there's a press conference announcing the change. And if Gregory refuses, then he'll be removed entirely. The board already voted. His ownership stake isn't enough to stop this. Vanessa is going to hate me, Richard said. When she finds out you're my mother, she'll think I was part of some scheme. But you didn't know. You're as much a victim as she is. Try explaining that when her family is pointing fingers. Mom, I love her, but I don't know if we can survive this. What if I backed out? What if I told the board I have a conflict of interest? Could you do that legally? Technically, yes. It would be complicated. I'd have to find a replacement fast, but it's possible. And would you really walk away to protect my relationship? Before I could answer, Richard's phone rang. Vanessa's name flashing. Hey, he said carefully. Okay, I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up. What happened? Gregory had a heart attack. He's at Greenwich Hospital, stable but serious. I need to go, Richard said. Wait, do you want me to come? No, Richard cut me off. You've done enough. Just figure out your priorities because Monday is coming, and you need to decide who you want to be. Then he was gone, and I stood wondering if in trying to protect everyone, I'd protected no one. The call came at 6 Monday morning. Margaret, Gregory checked himself out of the hospital, and he's planning to show up at the press conference with his own statement. Let him come, I said. He has every right to be there. Margaret, this could get ugly. I'm done trying to control every variable. Sometimes you have to trust the truth will be enough. I dressed in charcoal gray, minimal jewelry, my husband's watch. Richard hadn't called since Saturday. At 8:30, my driver picked me up. The building was modern glass and steel, news vans already setting up. My executive team waited in the lobby. Are you ready for this? My COO asked. I hear Gregory's planning to make this difficult. I've been ready for difficult my entire life. The boardroom was filling with board members and executives. Margaret Hayes, the chairman said, shaking my hand. I trust you're prepared. As prepared as I can be. Has Mr. Bradford arrived? The doors opened, and Gregory walked in, looking terrible, gray-faced and hollow-eyed, but fury in his eyes. I didn't expect you to be here, the chairman said. Rest while strangers dismantle everything I built? I don't think so. It's not being stolen, I said quietly. You, he breathed, recognition dawning. You're the one they brought in, Richard's mother. Mr. Bradford, I understand this is difficult. But yes, I'm Margaret Hayes, CEO of Meridian Holdings, and as of this morning, CEO of Bradford Industries. You connived your way into my son's life? Gregory accused. You manipulated everything to orchestrate this humiliation. I did nothing of the kind. I didn't even know your daughter existed when we began acquisition. Don't pretend this is just business. You sat in my home, let us insult you, and all along you were planning this. Mr. Bradford? The chairman intervened. The board voted legally and unanimously. Your company was failing. My company was not failing. The financial reports tell a different story, a board member said. We were 6 months from insolvency. You'd lost major contracts. Something had to change. The doors opened and Richard walked in with Vanessa, both looking exhausted. What are they doing here? Vanessa is a Bradford, Richard said calmly. She has a right to hear what's being said, and I'm here because my mother is at the center, and I'm tired of getting information secondhand. Gregory turned on Richard. You knew what your mother was planning. I knew nothing until 3 days ago, Richard said. I found out at the same dinner where you made it clear you thought my mother wasn't good enough. So before throwing accusations, maybe look in a mirror. Dad? Vanessa said, her voice breaking. Please, you're sick. You should be in hospital. I haven't lost anything, Gregory insisted, but his face was going gray. Mr. Bradford? I said gently. I know you think I'm your enemy, but I'm not. I'm here because this company deserves leadership that can take it into the future. You don't get to honor anything, Gregory said, his breathing labored. I built this company from nothing, he said louder. I provided jobs for hundreds, and you're taking it because of one bad quarter. It was more than one bad quarter, I said quietly, and you know it. How dare you? Gregory started but suddenly stopped, his hand going to his chest, face contorting. Dad! Vanessa screamed as he collapsed. Someone call an ambulance! I shouted. Richard was already on his phone. The paramedics arrived quickly, loading Gregory onto a stretcher, Vanessa following. I have to go with him, she said. I know, Richard replied, but Vanessa shook her head, tears flowing. Richard, I can't. We can't. Your mother destroyed my family. How are we supposed to build a life with that between us? I watched my son's face crumble as she walked away. As the boardroom cleared, I stood with Richard and the wreckage. I'm sorry, I said. I know, Richard said quietly. But Mom, a man just had a heart attack because the stress broke him, and I lost the woman I love because of business decisions made in boardrooms I never knew existed. The chairman cleared his throat. Ms. Hayes, the press conference is in 20 minutes. Do you want to postpone? I looked at Richard. Cancel it, I said. Cancel everything. I'm stepping back. Margaret, you can't walk away. We have contracts. Find another CEO, someone with no personal connections. I'll stay on as consultant, but I won't take the position. But why? Because, I said, looking at Richard, I finally figured out my priorities, and leading a company isn't worth losing my son. Did you mean that? Richard asked. I meant it. I forgot wealth without family is just numbers. What happens now? Now I figure out how to fix what I broke. Starting with making sure Gregory gets the best care and his family doesn't lose everything. And us? I don't know, I admitted, but I'd like to try. I'm willing, he said, but Mom, no more secrets. It has to be real. Deal, I said. As we left, I realized I didn't care about controlling narratives anymore. I was done hiding. 2 weeks passed in hospital visits. Gregory survived barely. I sat with Clarissa in the waiting room. Why are you here? She asked. You got what you wanted. Because I never wanted him to die. I wanted to save a company, never this devastation. I was horrible to you at that dinner, she said. I judged you, made sure you knew I thought you weren't good enough. I appreciate that, and I wasn't entirely honest either. I sat there knowing information that would have changed everything. The difference is, your role was strategic. Mine was just petty. Turns out our whole life was built on borrowed time. How much trouble are you in? The estate is mortgaged to 90%. We have debt we can't pay. Gregory's medical bills will be catastrophic without his salary. She paused. I don't know how we'll survive. I'm going to make sure Gregory keeps his consulting contract, I said. Full salary and benefits for 3 years, and I'll personally cover medical expenses. No strings, no publicity. Why would you do that after everything? Because your daughter loves my son, and because I have more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes. And maybe kindness is more important than being right. When Vanessa found out she showed up at my apartment, eyes red. I don't understand you. My family was horrible. My father tried to humiliate you, and you're saving us. Because spite is exhausting, and because your father's mistakes don't define you, and because Richard loves you, and I refuse to be the reason he loses someone he cares about. I told him we were done, she said. I said terrible things. I blamed him for something he had no control over, and now I don't know how to take it back. Do you love him? Yes, but I don't know if that's enough. My family will never accept him. Then you have to decide what matters more. Your family's comfort or your own happiness. Living to please other people is the fastest way to lose yourself entirely. That's why you hid your wealth, she said slowly. You were protecting Richard from defining himself by money. That was part of it, but it was also about protecting myself. I was so afraid of being seen as just a rich woman that I made myself invisible. And in the process, I taught my son that love meant hiding parts of yourself. We talked for 2 hours about family and expectations and trying to be perfect when perfect is impossible. Thank you, she said, for giving my father his dignity and for not giving up on Richard and me. I'm not giving up, but you two need to figure this out yourselves. I can only stop being the obstacle. Richard came the next afternoon, looking lighter. She told me what you did, Mom. That was. He shook his head. It was the right thing to do. He took my hand. I'm sorry, I said, for hiding so much for so long, for teaching you that success meant struggle, for almost destroying your relationship. Mom, you weren't wrong about everything. I am better off for having worked for what I have. But you were wrong about thinking you had to carry everything alone. We cried together, purging years of unspoken hurt. The board found a new CEO, a woman with extensive experience and no personal connections, and I stepped back to consulting. Gregory recovered slowly and actually called to thank me. I don't understand why you're helping me, he admitted. I was arrogant and dismissive. We all make mistakes. The trick is learning from them. I almost didn't learn in time. There was a pause. Margaret, I spent 30 years building a company, and I'm realizing I have no idea who I am without it. You seem to have figured out how to have wealth without letting it define you. How? I haven't figured it out, I admitted. I'm still learning, but I think it starts with being willing to be vulnerable, to let people see you without armor, to value relationships over reputation. 6 months later, Richard and Vanessa got married in a small ceremony at a botanical garden. Nothing like the elaborate wedding they'd planned, but infinitely more meaningful. I sat next to Clarissa and Gregory, all of us in simple clothes, there to celebrate 2 people who'd survived their family's drama. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, Gregory actually laughed. I think we've done enough objecting to last a lifetime, and everyone laughed with him. At the reception, Clarissa pulled me aside. I never properly apologized for that dinner. For the vintage dress comment and the financial compatibility speech, I was showing off and cruel. I appreciate that, and I'm sorry too for not being honest from the beginning. We stood there, 2 women who'd started as enemies and stumbled into something resembling respect. You know what the funniest part is? Clarissa said. I spent that whole dinner trying to prove the Bradford family was better, and it turned out you had the power to destroy us, or save us, and you chose to save us. Neither of us is better, I said. We're just two families who almost destroyed ourselves with pride before we figured out what actually matters. As evening wore on, I stood at the edge of the garden watching Richard and Vanessa surrounded by people who loved them, and I thought about the journey that brought us here. I'd spent decades building wealth and protecting secrets, convinced invisibility was security. But watching my son begin his married life with honesty, I realized I'd had it backwards. Real security didn't come from hiding behind facades. It came from being willing to be fully seen and trusting people would love you anyway. Richard came over, pulling me into a dance. "Mom," he said, "I need to tell you something. Vanessa and I have been talking. We want to start a foundation, something that helps young entrepreneurs with great ideas but no capital, and we were hoping you'd consider partnering with us. Not just financially, but actually working together. You want to work with me after everything? Mom, you spent your career saving companies and protecting jobs. Imagine what you could do helping people build things from the ground up. Doing it together, the three of us. It feels like we could turn all the mess into something good." I looked at Vanessa, who watched with hopeful expression. "I'd love that," I said, meaning it more than anything in years. Gregory approached with Clarissa. "Margaret," he said, "I wanted to thank you, not just for the financial support, but for showing me what real leadership looks like. You could have destroyed us and been justified, but you chose mercy. I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because it was right. I know, that's what makes it impressive." We shook hands with genuine respect. As I drove home that night, I thought about the journey from that first disastrous dinner to this moment of tentative peace, and I realized every choice, good and bad, had led me here, to a place where I could finally be fully myself without apology. The city lights blurred past, each representing someone's story, and I understood wealth wasn't measured in bank accounts. It was measured in moments like tonight, in relationships rebuilt, in families healed, in second chances. My phone rang, Richard's name flashing. "Mom, I forgot to tell you, Vanessa's pregnant. We're having a baby in 7 months." The news hit like pure joy. "That's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. We're telling them tomorrow, but Mom, I wanted you to be first to know, and I wanted to ask, when the baby comes, could you just be Grandma, not the secret millionaire or corporate CEO? Just my mom being a grandmother?" The request was simple but profound, an invitation to step fully into my life without masks, to be loved not for what I'd accomplished, but for who I was. "I would love nothing more," I said, "just Grandma, I promise." I sat in my car thinking about the grandchild who would grow up knowing exactly who I was, wealth and all, but learning that money was just one small part of a larger story about work and love and choosing kindness over pride. Tomorrow, I would start simplifying my life, being more public about philanthropic work, stepping out of shadows into a life lived authentically. But tonight, I sat in my modest apartment parking lot, a wealthy woman in an ordinary car, about to become a grandmother, and I felt richer than I'd ever felt building my fortune in secret. The irony wasn't lost that it took almost losing everything that mattered to understand what wealth really meant. Not numbers in accounts, but the gift of being fully known by people you love and being loved anyway. I walked toward my building, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't the widow or the CEO. I was just me, finally free from the weight of carefully constructed identities. The night was cool and clear, stars visible despite city lights, and I looked up thinking about my late husband, how proud he would be that I'd finally learned the lesson he'd been trying to teach, that the best legacy wasn't what you accumulated, but what you gave away. Not just money, but truth and vulnerability and love without conditions. 3 years later, I stood in my office at the Hayes Bradford Foundation, watching my granddaughter Claire toddle around with the fearless confidence of a 2-year-old who knew she was deeply loved. And I marveled at how completely my life had transformed from strategic invisibility to radical transparency. The foundation had exceeded every expectation. We'd funded 43 startups, helped launch 17 new technologies, created over 800 jobs. But more than the numbers, we'd built something genuinely meaningful. Richard walked in carrying coffee. "She's going to reorganize your entire filing system," he warned. "Good, it probably needs it. I've been too focused on the new accelerator program." This was the new me, admitting imperfection without apology, asking for help without shame. Vanessa appeared in the doorway. "Gregory and Clarissa just arrived. They're setting up in the conference room for the board meeting." The fact that Vanessa called Clarissa Mom in my presence without awkwardness was perhaps the best evidence of how far we'd all come. Claire saw her other grandmother and took off running, and I watched Clarissa scoop her up with a genuine smile that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. The board meeting was routine, reviewing applications, discussing funding strategies, planning our entrepreneur conference. But what made it special was the easy collaboration between people who'd started as enemies and somehow become family. After the meeting, Gregory pulled me aside. "Margaret, I've been thinking about something. Bradford Industries is doing well now, and I've been wondering if there might be a way to partner our foundation with the company, creating an innovation pipeline where Bradford employees can pitch ideas and receive funding." The proposal was brilliant, creating structure that honored Bradford's legacy while building something new. I love that idea. It would need careful legal structuring, but conceptually, it's exactly the kind of systemic change we're trying to create. "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were nobody," Gregory said. "Just Richard's mother with a modest apartment. And I've realized that was the point. You were teaching all of us that value isn't about appearance, it's about substance." "I was mostly just scared," I admitted. "Scared of being judged, scared of losing privacy, scared that people would see me differently. Turns out being scared is exhausting. Being honest is actually much easier." Clarissa joined us. Claire balanced on her hip. "We're having a family dinner next week. Nothing fancy, Margaret. You'll come?" "I wouldn't miss it." As everyone left, Richard hung back with Claire asleep in his arms. "Mom," he said quietly, "I wanted to thank you, not just for the foundation or for helping with Claire, but for showing me that it's okay to change your mind, to admit you were wrong, to rebuild yourself into someone better. You're giving me too much credit. You and Vanessa did the hard work of rebuilding your relationship. I just stopped being the obstacle. But that was the work, recognizing when you were the obstacle and choosing to move. Most people never do that." We walked out into afternoon sunlight. My phone buzzed. My net worth had actually grown significantly, proving sometimes the best strategy was knowing when to delegate and trust others. But the number barely registered. Just data on a screen? Because I'd finally learned the real measure of wealth was moments like this. Walking with family, building something meaningful, being fully present without masks. That evening, in my apartment, I made tea and settled into my late husband's chair with deep satisfaction. The journey from that first dinner to this moment had been painful and messy, and nothing like I'd planned. But it had taught me more about myself than 40 years of careful control ever had. I'd learned vulnerability wasn't weakness, that admitting mistakes was stronger than defending perfection, that real power came from lifting others up rather than proving superiority. I'd learned family wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up honestly even when honesty was uncomfortable, about choosing forgiveness over resentment, about believing people could change because you'd change too. And I'd learned wealth, real wealth, couldn't be measured in dollars or controlled through planning. It grew in spaces between people, in shared laughter and forgiven mistakes, in second chances and new beginnings. My phone rang, Richard's voice excited. "Mom," Claire just said her first full sentence. She pointed at Vanessa's stomach and said, "New baby coming. We haven't even told her yet that Vanessa's pregnant again." The joy was infectious. "That's wonderful. Tell her Grandma can't wait to meet the new baby, and Richard, thank you for giving me this life." "Mom," he said softly, "you gave yourself this life by choosing to stop hiding, by being brave enough to be real. I'm just grateful I get to witness it." After we hung up, I sat in the darkening apartment, just sitting with gratitude and peace and the profound relief of being fully known. The girl I'd been 40 years ago, working nights and studying days, building something from nothing through determination, would barely recognize the woman I'd become. But I thought she'd be proud, not of the money or success, but of the courage it took to let all that go, to choose people over prestige, love over legacy, truth over control. Tomorrow I'd go back to the foundation, review applications, mentor young entrepreneurs, be grandma to Claire, continue building this life I'd stumbled into by accident and chosen to keep on purpose. But tonight, I just sat in my late husband's chair in my modest apartment, wealthy beyond measure and finally free, and I thought about that dinner 3 years ago when everything fell apart and led somehow to everything coming together. The Bradford family who'd mocked me had become my partners in creating something meaningful. My son who'd felt betrayed had forgiven and rebuilt our relationship stronger than before, and I'd discovered that the person I'd been hiding wasn't as impressive as the person I became when I stopped hiding. There was a lesson in that about how sometimes the worst moments become doorways to the best ones, how public humiliation can transform into private triumph, how losing control can lead to finding yourself. My phone glowed with a message from Vanessa. "Thank you for everything, for saving my family, for building this foundation with us, for being the grandmother Claire adores. You changed all our lives by being brave enough to be yourself." I read those words 3 times, letting them sink in, and I realized that was the real story, not the revenge or revelation or corporate drama, but the quiet revolution of choosing authenticity over image, connection over control, love over fear. The moon rose outside my window, casting silver light across familiar furniture, and I sat in that light thinking about all the people afraid to be fully seen, who hid behind facades because they thought the truth wouldn't be enough. And I wanted to tell them what I'd learned, that being enough wasn't about accomplishments or acquisitions. It was about showing up honestly, making mistakes publicly, and trusting that people who mattered would love you not despite your imperfections, but because of them, because they made you real. The story of my son's rich in-laws mocking me had become the story of how we all learned to stop performing and start living. How money couldn't buy respect, but honesty could earn it. How the greatest power was courage to be vulnerable. And sitting there in my modest apartment, worth hundreds of millions, but living simply by choice, surrounded by family who knew exactly who I was and loved me anyway, I understood this was what success really looked like. Not headlines or boardrooms or managed images, but quiet evenings and granddaughter giggles and second chances freely given. This was wealth that couldn't be hidden or stolen or lost to market fluctuations. This was fortune beyond measure. This was finally, completely, beautifully enough. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever felt pressured to hide parts of yourself to fit others' expectations? What would you have done in my situation? Your stories matter, and sharing them helps us all feel less alone. And if you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe. There are so many more stories to share about real people finding their way through impossible situations to something better on the other side. Remember, the greatest courage isn't in accumulating wealth or power. It's in being brave enough to be fully yourself, flaws and fortune and all. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it inspires you to live yours with honesty and heart.